Welcome to 21st Century Dating Decoded. We're making modern love simple. Get ready to decode your love life. Brought to you by Speed Mingle.
Imagine filtering out like 74% of your dating pool with just a single non-negotiable question.
Wow. Yeah. That's a lot.
Right. Like you don't ask about their career, you don't ask about their hobbies, you don't even ask if they want kids.
You just ask one thing.
Exactly. You ask who they voted for. And based on that one single answer, nearly 3/4 of a demographic is just poof, instantly wiped off the board.
Yeah.
And in 2024, that is not, some dystopian hypothetical you'd find in a sociology seminar. That is the empirical, actual reality of the modern dating market.
It really is. I mean, it completely shatters our traditional understanding of how human beings pair off.
Right, absolutely.
We are watching this real-time renegotiation of intimacy, of household formation. I mean, what it even means to build a life with someone else is changing.
Yeah.
The friction out there right now is just palpable. You can really feel it.
It really is. And that is exactly our mission for you today. Welcome to the Deep Dive.
We're so glad you're here.
Today, we are unpacking a massive tectonic sociological shift. We're talking about the rapidly widening ideological chasm between young men and young women.
Right.
And we're looking at the rise of this phenomenon called heteropessimism, the mechanics behind this shrinking dating pool, and what cultural commentators are now branding the anti-marriage movement.
Yeah, the anti-marriage movement. And to get to the bottom of how this is rewiring, well, pretty much everything from the housing market to our fundamental experience of loneliness, we have pulled together an incredibly diverse stack of sources for you today.
It's a really deep stack this time.
It is, yeah. We are pulling from political commentary and opinion columns from USA Today and Fox News. We also have hard economic real estate data from NAEBA. That's the National Association of Exclusive Buyer Agents.
Super interesting data in there, by the way.
Oh, absolutely mind-blowing. And we're also diving into academic research from Semantic Scholar, a comprehensive cultural report from King's College London, and historical data tracking the 4B movement out of South Korea.
And before we dive in, we really have to make a very crucial disclaimer here for you.
Yes, very important.
The sources you provided us for this dive, they contain highly politically charged commentary, like very charged.
Very.
We have texts in this stack representing staunchly conservative arguments, and we have texts representing firmly progressive viewpoints. So our goal here today is absolutely not to endorse any specific side.
Right. We are not taking a political stance here.
Not at all. And we are certainly not here to declare a winner in the modern gender divide.
Definitely not. Our job is just to impartially analyze the data, break down the rhetoric, and explain the underlying socioeconomic logic behind these very different cultural movements.
Exactly. We want to lay out the mechanics of what is actually happening so you can look at the evidence and draw your own informed conclusions. Okay, let's unpack this, because the first thing jumping out of the Gallup polling data in our stack is a literal ideological chasm.
Yeah, chasm is the right word for it.
According to the numbers, we are seeing a massive political divergence between young men and young women. So if you look at young women ages 18 to 29, 40% of them now identify as liberal.
40%.
Right. And that creates a staggering 15-point ideological gap compared to young men in that exact same age bracket who are increasingly leaning conservative or moderate.
Yeah, and to understand the velocity of that shift,
yeah,
to really grasp it, we have to look at the baseline.
The baseline, right.
Because between 2001 and 2007, the ideological gap between young men and women in that age group was barely visible.
But barely visible? Like how small?
It was only 3 percentage points.
Are you really?
Just 3 points.
Just 3 points. They essentially moved in tandem back then. They experienced the same cultural milestones, largely agreed on the trajectory of society, and they voted similarly.
Wow.
So a 15-point spread erupting in a single generation. I mean, that is a demographic earthquake. An earthquake. Yeah, I was reading through this and I kept asking myself, why now? How did we go from a 3-point margin to a 15-point chasm so quickly? Because it can't just be that people suddenly woke up with completely different opinions.
No, it's a confluence of structural changes.
What?
You have the algorithmic siloing of social media, right?
Yeah, right. The algorithms.
Yeah, where young men and women are fed entirely different cultural pipelines.
Yeah.
Different podcasts, different TikTok trends, entirely different news ecosystems.
They're basically living in different realities on their phones.
Exactly. You pair that with watershed cultural moments like the Me Too movement or the overturning of Roe v. Wade.
Massive shifts.
Huge.
Yeah.
And those fundamentally altered how young women perceive their bodily autonomy and institutional safety. And simultaneously, You have young men grappling with shifting economic landscapes and changes in traditional masculinity.
Right.
So the result is two demographics experiencing the exact same decade,
Right.
but processing it through entirely different realities.
And this divergence, it isn't just staying contained in the ballot box either. It is bleeding directly into how people live their day-to-day lives.
Yeah, the data really shows that.
Like the data from the Institute for Family Studies, the IFS, it tracks how this political identity is dictating household formation. They looked at college-educated adults between the ages of 22 and 40.
Okay.
And a majority of the conservative men and women in that group are married. But a majority of the liberals in that exact same group are not.
That is a stark contrast.
It is. College-educated conservatives are actually 50% more likely to be married than their liberal peers.
And, the philosophical divide behind those marriage rates tells the real story.
How so?
Well, the IFS data points out that when you ask college-educated conservatives if children are better off with married parents, over 70% say yes.
70%, okay.
Right. They view the institution of marriage as the necessary bedrock for a stable family. But when you ask college-educated liberals the exact same question, only 30% agree.
Wow, only 30%. So you essentially have two groups of young people out there trying to date, and they have completely, fundamentally incompatible blueprints for what a successful life even looks like.
Exactly.
Which brings us back to that 74% filter I mentioned at the top of the show. We have data from the American Perspective Survey looking at singles after the 2024 election.
The dating pool data.
Yeah. 9 in 10 single women who voted for Harris say they would be less likely to date a Trump supporter. And 74% of them say they would be a lot less likely.
What's fascinating here is how political identity is transformed, right?
Yeah.
From a private civic action into the primary gatekeeper for romantic relationships.
Yeah, it's the ultimate gatekeeper now.
Dating has basically become a high-stakes ideological negotiation. If you are entirely filtering out the opposite sex based on a voting record, you aren't just expressing a preference anymore.
Right.
You are physically reconfiguring the dating market. This ideological insulation is what leads directly to a broader cultural phenomenon mentioned throughout our texts, which is heteropessimism.
Heteropessimism. I mean, it's such a heavy clinical term, but the lived experience of it seems to be this ambient, crushing exhaustion.
Yeah, exhaustion is a good word for it.
It's just the feeling that the friction of trying to bridge this 15-point gap just isn't worth the effort anymore. It's a growing disappointment or even antagonism toward heterosexual relationships altogether.
Because it's the realization that the cost of entry into a traditional relationship might actually require compromising your fundamental values or even your safety.
Right.
For many young people navigating this chasm, the math simply doesn't add up anymore.
I was really trying to conceptualize this shift while going through the sources, and I kept coming back to this analogy from the audio notes about the cable TV bundle from the late 90s.
Oh, yeah, the cable bundle. That's a great analogy.
Right. Think about traditional marriage for previous generations. It was exactly like signing up for cable. You signed one massive overarching contract, and you got the bundle.
You got the whole package.
You got companionship, you got a socially acceptable path to having children, you got social status, financial security, and this built-in retirement plan to care for you when you aged.
And you accepted the terms of that bundle because, frankly, it was the only way to get the programming you needed to survive in that society.
Exactly.
You took all 500 channels, even if you only wanted a few of them,
Yeah.
and you dealt with the hidden fees and the restrictive contracts because the alternative was just having no connection at all.
But the data is showing us that young people, and particularly young women, are unbundling their lives.
That's unbelievable, yeah.
They are looking at that traditional marriage contract and deciding they don't want the whole package. They are opting for, like, the streaming model of life.
Yeah.
A la carte.
Right, picking and choosing.
Yeah, they're realizing they can source financial security from their own careers. They can find community in chosen networks. And they don't need to sign this specific historical contract.
The central question our sources pose, however, is what happens when a society unbundles.
Yeah, what's the fallout?
How has this shift been received culturally? And what are the actual tangible consequences of walking away from that bundled security?
Well, if we look at the conservative commentators in our stack, the reaction is alarm, like serious alarm.
Oh, absolutely.
Because they are looking at this unbundling, they are observing this heteropessimism, and they are arguing that this isn't liberation at all. They view it as a massive generation-defining trap.
Right, and we have several opinion pieces outlining this critique in the stack. Notably, there are pieces from USA Today and Fox News columnist Ingrid Jacques.
Yeah, her pieces were very pointed.
They were. Her central thesis is that the progressive cultural framing of marriage as an oppressive institution is actively harming the very women it claims to liberate.
Okay, unpack that a bit.
Well, she points to the culture that surrounds young women today. The viral TikTok trends celebrating divorce glow-ups, the constant memes mocking men, the men the day before they ghost you jokes.
Oh, yeah, you see those everywhere.
Right. And the ubiquitous use of terms like toxic masculinity.
So the argument being made is that this isn't just harmless internet venting. It is an active, pervasive anti-marriage culture that intentionally alienates men and romanticizes female singlehood to a dangerous degree.
Exactly. Jacques and other commentators in the stack argue this rhetoric has created an anti-male backfire.
An anti-male backfire.
Yes. By constantly signaling to young women that men are unnecessary or inherently problematic, progressive ideology is depriving these women of the proven historical benefits of a committed partnership.
I see.
They outline 3 very specific hidden costs that single women are supposedly burdened with by following this unbundled narrative.
Right, let's go through those because the first hidden cost they point to is economic loss.
Economic loss, yes.
Which is fundamentally an argument about economies of scale.
It is straightforward financial math. Married couples, particularly dual-income households, accumulate substantially more wealth over a lifetime than single individuals.
Sure, 2 incomes are better than 1.
Exactly. When you are married, you are splitting a single mortgage or rent payment, you are sharing utility bills, you gain joint tax advantages, and you can pool your financial assets to invest.
Makes sense.
In an economy defined by high inflation and brutal housing costs, these columnists argue that single women are facing incredibly steep financial headwinds by trying to navigate the economy solo.
Right, the idea is you are essentially leaving the most powerful wealth-building engine in human history, the joint household, on the table just because of a cultural ideology.
That's the argument. And the second hidden cost they identify is the psychological toll.
The psychological toll.
Yeah, because while the cultural trope might be the blissfully happy, independent, career-driven single woman, these authors point to long-term empirical data that paints a different picture.
Right. Sociological studies routinely show that married people consistently report higher levels of happiness, greater overall life satisfaction, and lower rates of anxiety and depression compared to their single peers.
It's a built-in support system.
Exactly. A marriage provides a legally bound social support system. If you lose your job, or you experience a severe health crisis, a spouse provides a safety net that goes far beyond a group text with your friends or relying on government services.
Right.
The argument is that while career achievement is fulfilling, it rarely replaces the long-term mental and physical health benefits of a lifelong partnership.
Which leads to the third, and perhaps most urgent, hidden costs they emphasize, the biological and demographic crunch.
The ticking clock.
The ticking clock. This is where the cultural narrative collides with biological reality. The argument is that young women are encouraged to focus solely on their careers and their independence throughout their 20s.
Yeah, that's the message.
They're told to delay or outright reject serious relationships during those formative years. But that ideology eventually hits a wall in their 30s and 40s when strict fertility timelines become a major factor.
And according to these texts, by the time many of these women decide they actually do want a family or companionship, they find that the men they alienated in their 20s have essentially checked out of the dating market.
They call it an unintended relationship scarcity.
Wow.
Young men feeling constantly vilified by anti-male rhetoric and facing shifting expectations simply withdraw. They withdraw from dating, sometimes from higher education, and from traditional societal participation.
So the end result of this anti-marriage movement, according to this critique, isn't a victory for women at all.
No, not according to them.
It's a fractured social landscape where women are left biologically crunched, psychologically isolated, and economically vulnerable.
Exactly. The ultimate conclusion of these columnists is that the framing marriage as oppressive is a luxury belief pushed by liberal elites.
A luxury belief.
Yeah, a belief that sounds highly progressive in the sociology seminar, but leaves everyday single women paying a devastating real-world price.
Okay, I have to jump in here. I hear what Jacques and the other columnists are arguing, but if this economic devastation narrative is accurate, The actual financial behavior of single women today should reflect that.
Right, it should show in the numbers.
We should be seeing an epidemic of destitute single women wandering the streets, completely crushed by the weight of the modern economy because they didn't buy into the marriage bundle.
You would think so.
But looking at the actual bank accounts, the mortgage approvals, and the hard economic data, that narrative completely falls apart.
It does. The
Yep.
data absolutely contradicts the assumption that single women are floundering. In fact, it reveals a profound structural shift in how wealth is being generated outside of marriage.
Here's where it gets really interesting. We have data from NABA, the National Association of Exclusive Buyer Agents, tracking who is actually purchasing homes in America right now.
This is real estate data.
Yeah. And for the first time on record, single women are not just participating in the market. They are vastly overtaking single men in purchasing power and market share for first-time home buyers.
The disparity is remarkable.
It really is.
When you look at the breakdown of first-time home buyers, about 50% are married couples, which aligns with historical expectations.
Sure.
But among the unmarried buyers, 25% of all first-time buyers are single women. Only 10% are single men.
25% to 10%.
Single women are entering the real estate market at 2.5 times the rate of their male counterparts.
And they aren't just scraping by to buy these houses either. They actually have significantly more purchasing power.
Oh, absolutely.
The NAEDA data shows that the median income for single female first-time buyers is now $73,000. Meanwhile, the median income for single male buyers has dropped to $66,400.
If we evaluate this data against the conservative critique we just outlined, a fascinating picture emerges.
Yeah.
The columnist argued that unbundling marriage inevitably leads to poverty because you lose the dual income advantage. But the NAEB data shows that women have simply found a different engine for wealth creation.
Right. They're using education.
Yes, they have heavily utilized educational attainment. I mean, they've been outpacing men in college enrollment and degree completion for over a decade now.
Wow.
And they're using that to build their own independent economic bedrock. They aren't waiting for a dual income marriage to access equity.
They are using real estate as a massive forced savings account.
Exactly. They are looking at high inflation, soaring rent prices, and economic volatility, and they are using fixed-rate mortgages to stabilize their housing costs and hedge against the broader economy.
That's smart.
It is. They are building equity that serves as a tangible financial safety net, providing security whether they ever decide to get married or not. The mechanism of wealth building has shifted from a relational requirement to an individual achievement.
I want to highlight some historical context from the NEEBA text here because I think it puts the sheer scale of this economic shift into perspective for you.
Yeah, this part is wild.
We are talking about single women leading the single buyer market in 47 out of 50 states.
47 states.
They own 2.72 million more homes than single men nationwide.
Millions.
But just 50 years ago, prior to the Equal Credit Opportunity Act of 1974, it was entirely legal and common practice for a bank to require a woman to have a male cosigner just to get a mortgage.
Let that sink in. 50 years ago, the institution of marriage was quite literally a legal prerequisite for a woman to access capital and build property wealth in many cases.
That's just crazy to think about now.
The banking algorithm of the time viewed a single woman as an inherent credit risk.
You had to buy the cable bundle if you wanted a roof over your head that you actually own.
Right.
And now they are the dominant single demographic in the market. It fundamentally undercuts the idea that these women are being economically victimized by their own independence. They are actively rewriting the rules of long-term equity.
They are succeeding within the capitalist framework. However, economic independence through homeownership is just one facet of this unbundling.
Right, there's more to it.
The NAEB data shows us what happens when women seek financial autonomy while remaining engaged with the existing system. But what happens when the desire for independence moves past financial security and evolves into a total radical withdrawal from the system itself?
Yeah, what happens when it's not just about securing a mortgage, but about a complete rejection of the societal expectations placed on women?
That brings us to the 4B movement.
Right. That brings us to a phenomenon in our source stack that takes heteropessimism to its absolute extreme.
The 4B movement is arguably the most radical manifestation of the burnout we've been tracking. It originated in South Korea between 2017 and 2019.
Okay.
And it took root deeply in feminist digital circles, like on Twitter and a forum called WOMAD.
For those listening who might not be familiar with it, 4B stands for the four no's.
The four no's.
The prefix B in Korean translates roughly to no or un, and the four tenets of this movement are absolute and uncompromising.
Yes, very strict.
There's bihan, which means no marriage to men, bishulsen, meaning no childbirth, bayone, which is no dating or romance with men, and bisexu, no sexual relationships with men.
It is a categorical boycott of patriarchal relationship structures.
A total boycott.
But to understand why something so extreme gained traction, we have to examine the specific sociocultural pressure cooker of South Korea.
Because it didn't just happen in a vacuum.
No, not at all. It was a reaction to several critical compounding flashpoints. First and foremost is the incredibly heavy double burden placed on South Korean women.
The double burden.
They're expected to be ideal workers in a highly demanding corporate culture, while simultaneously performing the vast majority of unpaid domestic labor and childcare at home.
The math of that double burden is staggering. You are working exhaustive 50-plus hour weeks in an office and then coming home to a second entirely uncompensated full-time job of domestic care.
Right.
The exhaustion alone is a catalyst for withdrawal.
Add to that economic exhaustion, a profound lack of physical and digital safety. The movement was heavily galvanized by the 2016 Seochodong public toilet murder case.
Oh, that was a horrific case.
It was. A man murdered a woman simply because he felt ignored by women generally. It sparked national outrage and highlighted the vulnerability of women in public spaces.
Yeah.
Furthermore, South Korea has been battling a massive epidemic of molka.
Molka.
Yeah, that's the widespread illegal use of hidden spy cams to film women in public restrooms and changing rooms, which has now evolved into deepfake pornography.
Wow. So when you look at that environment, the crushing exhaustion of the double burden, the physical fear of violence, the digital violation of spy cams, you start to see why a movement defined entirely by withdrawal feels illogical to the people participating in it.
Exactly. It's a defensive posture.
It's also crucial to note the demographic backdrop here. South Korea currently has the lowest fertility rate in the entire world.
Shockingly low.
As of 2023, it sits at 0.72.
0.72.
Right, and the replacement rate needed to simply sustain a population is 2.1. So the societal fabric there is already under immense demographic strain.
And while sociologists consider 4B to be a declining, relatively fringe movement inside South Korea today, it experienced a massive viral resurgence in the United States immediately following the 2024 presidential election.
Yes, the sources note that Google searches for 4B spiked by 450% practically overnight.
450%.
And TikTok was flooded with videos of young American women declaring their alignment with the four no's.
American women were basically adapting the South Korean model of radical disengagement as a form of digital protest and a personal safety strategy.
Right.
In the wake of the overturning of Roe v. Wade and the election results, many women felt that the legal protections surrounding their bodily autonomy had been stripped away.
Yeah, a lot of fear and anger.
They looked at 4B and saw a blueprint for taking back control by simply refusing to participate in the systems that they felt put them at risk.
This raises an important question, though, and I want us to really dissect the premise of this movement.
Okay, let's do it.
When you look at the sheer scale of 4B, the absolute negation of an entire gender, the refusal to date, marry, or have children, is this actually a sustainable blueprint for empowerment?
That's the question.
Can a functioning, fulfilling human life be built entirely on the negation of others? Or are we just looking at the symptom of a deeply broken system?
This raises an important question, right? And the sociological data strongly suggests it is the latter.
It's a symptom.
Yeah, 4B is a reactive defense mechanism. When a demographic feels fundamentally unprotected by the state, whether that's lack of legal protection from digital sex crimes in South Korea, or the loss of reproductive health care in the U.S., and simultaneously feels exploited by the economy through the double burden of labor, total withdrawal feels like the only viable survival strategy. It isn't about building a collaborative utopia. It's about building a fortress.
But the thing about a fortress is that while it keeps threats out, it also locks you in.
Yep.
You eventually run out of supplies. A fortress is just a prison you built yourself. And we also have to look at the internal conflicts within the movement itself, which our Wikipedia source details quite clearly.
Yeah, that part is really concerning.
When you build a community entirely on exclusion, that exclusion often turns inward. Communities like WOMAD in South Korea, which were central to 4B, have documented histories of extreme transphobia and homophobia.
There were reports of 4B groups demanding members verify their biological sex with ID scanners before entering public spaces.
ID scanners.
Yeah, or asking for videos of people's Adam's apples to prove they were biologically female.
That is just wild.
It highlights the inherent danger of movements rooted in biological essentialism. When your entire ideology is based on drawing a hard defensive line against an outgroup, that line inevitably becomes increasingly rigid and punitive.
Right, and it often marginalizes vulnerable communities in the process.
Exactly.
So you have this viral movement rooted in very real, very valid exhaustion and fear. But the manifestation of it is this incredibly rigid separatism.
And what is so deeply fascinating is how this exact same underlying exhaustion, the burnout of modern capitalism, and the double burden of domestic labor, has spawned another massive viral trend that looks, on the surface, like the exact polar opposite of 4B.
You are talking about the trad wife.
The trad wife.
The traditional wife.
Yes. If 4B is the militant rejection of the patriarchal family, the trad wife aesthetic on social media is the complete and utter worship of it.
We are talking about those viral videos of women in, like, pristine vintage dresses, peacefully baking sourdough bread from scratch in a sunlit kitchen, softly talking about submitting to their husbands and embracing traditional gender roles.
It's a very specific, highly curated aesthetic.
To a casual observer or a cultural commentator, it looks like a massive cohort of young women are suddenly desperate to surrender their autonomy and return to the 1950s.
That's the narrative you see a lot.
But we have a comprehensive report in our stack from the King's College Ligon Global Institute for Women's Leadership that completely punctures this narrative.
Yes, they did a massive survey.
They actually surveyed 1,000 women aged 18 to 34 in the UK to see if this social media trend was translating into real-world ideological shifts.
And the results are incredibly telling.
Oh, total.
The data proves there is no mass ideological return to traditionalism. Among the young women surveyed, only 7% found the idea of men as sole decision-makers appealing.
Just 7%.
Only 16% found the idea of women as sole caregivers appealing.
Right.
The overwhelming majority of these young women continue to hold strongly progressive views on gender roles. They expect equality in the workplace, and they expect partnership in their relationships.
But here is the paradox the King's College researchers uncovered. Even though these women reject the underlying ideology of the trad wife, 79% of them admitted they were attracted to the aesthetics of the lifestyle.
79%. That is a huge number.
It is. They were drawn to the calm, the relaxed pace, the visual depiction of a life defined by leisure and domestic peace, rather than the corporate grind.
This reveals the profound irony of our current cultural moment. Both the radical separatist 4B movement and the hyper-traditional trad wife trend are reactions to the exact same sociological pathogen.
Which is
modern burnout.
Right. Think about it from the perspective of the listener right now. Imagine you are a young professional working 40 or 50 hours a week just to keep up with inflation and housing costs.
It's exhausting.
You are constantly fighting this ideal worker myth that demands total, uncompromising devotion to your employer.
Yeah.
But you also know that if you decide to have children, childcare costs are so astronomical that a massive portion of your paycheck will just vanish.
Just disappear.
And you know, the statistical reality is that despite being a dual-income household, you will likely still carry the mental load of managing the household.
Oh, the mental load is huge.
Scheduling doctor's appointments, buying groceries, doing the laundry.
You are trapped on the hamster wheel of the double burden. The system is demanding everything from you, both professionally and domestically, and offering very little structural support in return.
You are exhausted to your bones, and you open TikTok on your commute, and you see a woman who doesn't have a boss.
Right.
She isn't fighting traffic. She isn't navigating office politics. She is just quietly arranging flowers and baking bread in a beautiful, quiet house.
It looks like heaven.
The appeal of the trad wife isn't that young women suddenly want to lose their voting rights or submit to a husband's absolute authority. It's a fantasy about getting off the hamster wheel.
Exactly.
It is pure visual escapism from the crushing pressures of modern capitalism.
It is the deep desire for rest, masquerading as a desire for tradition. As the King's College report acutely notes, when systems fail people, when the modern workplace refuses to accommodate family lives, and when childcare remains unaffordable, people become vulnerable to solutions that promise relief.
Yeah.
Even if those solutions come wrapped in an ideology that ultimately threatens their autonomy. The trad wife fantasy offers an exit strategy from the double burden, just as 4B offers an exit strategy from the risks of the modern dating market.
But they are both just that. exit strategies. They are retreats from a society that feels unmanageable.
Exactly.
Which brings us to the most critical piece of this puzzle. If women are unbundling marriage, if they are fleeing to the solitary safety of real estate, if they are fantasizing about escaping the workforce entirely or boycotting men altogether, what is the ultimate emotional cost of all this unbundling?
That is the million-dollar question.
Are we just marching toward a future of highly optimized, incredibly lonely isolation?
Well, to answer that, we have to look at the research from sociologist Chasm.
Yes, this was fascinating.
His work on loneliness, gender inequality, and social isolation is incredibly counterintuitive, and it fundamentally challenges the conservative critique we discussed earlier.
When you listen to commentators like Ingrid Jacques, the baseline assumption is that the breakdown of traditional marriage must inherently equal a massive spike in societal loneliness.
Right. If you're not married, you must be lonely.
If people aren't getting married, they must be lonely. But Chaubin's research introduces a concept called the emancipation dividend.
The emancipation dividend. And it completely flips the traditional narrative.
How so?
Chaubin's data, which analyzes relationship dynamics across multiple countries, shows that nations with high levels of gender equality and accessible, no-fault divorce laws actually possess lower overall rates of average day-to-day loneliness.
See, I was stuck on this part of the reading for a while because it sounds backward at first glance.
It does sound backward.
If everyone has the freedom to leave and divorce rates are higher, shouldn't everyone be lonelier?
It seems counterintuitive until you examine the mechanism at play, which is relationship mobility.
Okay, mobility.
In highly patriarchal societies with strict traditional marriage bundles, people, specifically women, are often financially, legally, or socially trapped in toxic, abusive, or simply deeply unhappy marriages.
Quiet.
They are technically accompanied, but profoundly lonely. When you introduce gender equality and financial independence, you remove that trap.
Ah, I see.
Because people are no longer forced to stay, the relationships that do survive are of a much higher average quality. If a partnership is purely voluntary, it has to be maintained through mutual respect, emotional support, and actual compatibility, rather than mere obligation.
The ambient stress of millions of people trapped in miserable marriages has been essentially removed from the population.
Exactly. So on a day-to-day basis, people in high-equality societies are actually happier, more fulfilled, and report feeling less lonely in their primary relationships.
Wow.
But this emancipation dividend comes with a very sharp double-edged sword.
There's always a catch.
Chaubin calls it the network concentration effect, which creates what he terms the loneliness paradox.
So what does this all mean? How does the emancipation dividend turn into a paradox?
The paradox is that while our modern relationships are undeniably higher quality, our emotional networks are substantially smaller.
Smaller networks.
Right. Driven by lower fertility rates, increased geographic mobility, fewer extended kinship ties, and a cultural focus on curating only the best friends and partners, we put all of our emotional eggs into one or two highly optimized baskets.
That makes sense.
These modern networks are high quality, but they are incredibly high maintenance and structurally fragile.
There is an analogy in the audio source notes for this that I think perfectly captures the reality of the loneliness paradox. It's the itchy sweater analogy.
Oh, the itchy sweater. Yes.
Think about traditional obligatory family networks, the massive extended families, the required marriages, the local communities you were born into and never left.
You knew everyone.
Right. It was like being forced to keep and wear every uncomfortable, itchy sweater ever given to you by a relative.
So uncomfortable.
It was stifling, it was itchy, it caused chronic stress, and you often hated it.
But the crucial trade-off was that you were never naked.
Exactly.
You were never completely unprotected from the elements.
You were irritated, you were stressed, but you were never totally alone. What we have done today through unbundling and the emancipation dividend is we have thrown out all the itchy sweaters.
But it tossed them out.
We tossed out the obligatory ties, the toxic marriages, the forced family gatherings, and we kept one or two perfect, custom-tailored, incredibly comfortable outfits, our small, carefully chosen networks.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, we are exponentially happier on a daily basis in those custom outfits.
Yo, much happier.
But if that one outfit tears, if a relationship fails, if a spouse passes away, or if a severe conflict fractures a small friend group, We have no backup sweaters.
No backup sweaters.
We are completely exposed to the cold.
We have built a single point of failure social structure.
Yes.
The day-to-day loneliness is lower, but the threat of catastrophic total isolation is exponentially higher.
In the traditional model, if your marriage was miserable, you were unhappy, but you still had a vast, obligatory web of community, extended family, and neighborhood ties to keep you from falling off the edge of the world.
Right, there was a net.
In the modern unbundled model, if your optimized, highly concentrated network fails, there is no safety net to catch you. The drop into devastating isolation is steep and immediate.
It is the inherent fragility of progress. We have optimized our lives for quality and individual autonomy, but we have sacrificed structural resilience.
Precisely. And this paradox is the invisible engine driving all of the movements we've analyzed today.
How so?
Well, the conservative commentators see the terrifying reality of the single point of failure and demand. We return to the itchy sweaters of traditional obligatory marriage.
Right.
The 4B movement looks at the risks of the modern network and decides the only safe option is to live in a solitary fortress.
Building a wall.
And the tradwife looks at the exhaustion of maintaining these high-quality networks under the pressure of capitalism and fantasizes about retreating to an idealized aesthetic past where the burden wasn't hers to carry.
Which brings us to the synthesis of this entire deep dive. We started by looking at a 15-point ideological chasm that is literally breaking the modern dating market, making the search for a partner feel like a high-stakes political negotiation.
Yeah, that 74% filter.
We saw how conservative commentators view this unbundling as a dangerous trap that will leave women impoverished and alone.
But we countered that with the hard economic reality that women are subverting that trap.
Buying houses.
Yes, utilizing education and out-earning their single male peers to dominate the single home buyer real estate market, building independent wealth and creating their own financial safety nets.
And we explored how the extreme, crushing burnout of the modern double burden has spawned both the radical, exclusionary boycott of the 4B movement and the visual escapism of the tradwife fantasy.
What society is witnessing right now is the chaotic, highly visible death of an old relational paradigm. The obligatory cable bundle of traditional marriage.
The cable bundle is gone.
It's gone. And we are seeing the messy, complicated birth of a new one. This new paradigm is highly optimized for individual freedom, financial autonomy, and relationship quality.
But it's fragile.
But, as we've seen through Chaubin's research, it is currently highly fragile. We're in a transitional period trying to balance the undeniable benefits of the emancipation dividend with the terrifying risks of a single point of failure society.
And transition periods are always messy. We are flying the plane while we are still building it.
Exactly.
Which leaves me with a final provocative thought for you to chew on. It's something that wasn't explicitly debated in these specific sources, but seems like the logical next step in this sociological evolution.
Okay, let's hear it.
If traditional obligatory marriage is breaking down and solitary optimized independence carries the risk of catastrophic loneliness, what if the future of intimacy isn't romantic at all?
Oh, that is the unexplored frontier of the unbundled life.
Right. Could the next major societal shift be a return to multi-generational platonic communal living?
Communal living. Interesting.
Yeah. Imagine groups of friends or multiple families pooling their resources, buying real estate together, and building chosen families as a collective.
Like a modern tribe.
Yeah. It would be a way to hedge against the fragility of the single point of failure lifestyle. It allows people to share the double burden of domestic labor and childcare without having to return to the restrictive gender roles of the past. It's rebuilding the safety net, but you get to choose who is in it.
A chosen bundle, rather than an obligatory one. A way to have resilience without sacrificing autonomy.
It's something to think about the next time you look at your own network. Are you wearing an itchy sweater? Or are you relying on a single point of failure?
That's a great question to ask yourself.
We encourage you to view your own relationships, your housing choices, and your political conversations through this fascinating new lens. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the 15-point chasm. Stay curious, and we'll catch you next time.
Thank you for listening
and watching on the new Speed Mingle TV network.